I'm here with Donna Stoneham, and she, funny enough, is met my parents back in Cambodia a while back. And just a quick little backstory. They were on this trip for Seva, and Seva, they do eye surgeries. Is that right, Donna? They do.
Yeah, that's one of the things they do. Yeah, they do. It's eye care in developing countries primarily, and then they have a couple of programs in the United States as well.
Yeah, my parents were describing it. We all have a mutual friend who leads the organization, and the eye surgeries, it's basically low cost eye surgery. So they go into third world countries, people who don't have access to uh, eye care, and for like dollars, they can get access to a high quality doctor who I understand the surgeries are quick. It's like 15 minutes or something to like restore a sight. And they're seeing like 50 people a day. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable. And the conditions they work in, a lot of us would think, no way they can do this. But, the cool thing about Seva is what they really do is they help build the infrastructure and train the physicians in country to do work so that they're sustainable.
Yeah, so it's not
like we're going in and, on our white horses to save the day from America. They actually build the resources and the capacity to be able to continue to deliver the work when we're not. Yeah.
Wow. So my parents said, Donna's really cool. She's an executive coach. She's written a book and it's about thriving. You guys should connect. And now that we're doing this podcast, I reached out to her. We'd spoken a while back, and I've read your book, and I thought it'd be a pretty good fit for our audience. So I'm really excited and grateful for you to be on here today.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it. It'll be fun.
So how did you end up? It's such a funny world that you ended up in Cambodia with my parents, but you were on a trip, and you were on a trip away from work because you normally do executive coaching. You have several mission-based causes you're part of, the Positive Impact LLC and other things. How did you get into all this? I know you got a PhD too. What's your story in a quick nutshell?
Well, so I started my career as kind of a fast track corporate career, and I was working in sales and marketing for managed healthcare companies. And so what actually happened to me in my early 30s is I went through 3 mergers and acquisitions in 3 years and got laid off because it was in a high growth industry. It was actually managed healthcare in the pharmaceutical space. So mail order pharmacy was what I was doing at the time. And I realized that I wasn't really happy doing what I was doing. What I really wanted to do was to be able to help with some of the dysfunction that I saw happening in organizations. Some of which I was creating myself because I was a leader. And this was a while back. And, especially for women, I think at the time, it was like you led the way you thought you were supposed to lead, which was like the men were leading and not really like your most authentic self. And so, in retrospect, I probably would not have wanted to work for me at the time years ago, but that sort of led me on this quest to want to try to go in from the outside to help. So I started a coaching and consulting practice. It's been 26 years ago. Wow. And left the corporate world and went out on my own. And so I worked with a lot of companies. I worked in a lot of technology companies. I worked at what used to be Compaq Computers years ago. And I worked at HP, and I worked with Blue Arc, and I worked with a number of different technology companies at the time. But everything is, and most recently in the last 6 or 7 years, it's been primarily focused in biotechnology and healthcare.
Sure.
So I really gravitate towards working with organizations that are very mission driven and are trying to do something to really help change the world and make it a better place for people. So that's kind of how I got into it. I was on the inside, and then I went in from the outside to the inside, and always with the vision and the hope of helping people live a more creative, abundant, and giving life. I really believe very strongly in the principle of paying it forward and giving back. So I think that's when people are their happiest, when they're able to figure out how to do that and do it well.
You really think being an authentic person can lead to greater leadership? You mentioned that you were trying to lead back in how does that work out? Because maybe some woman listening to this does feel like she has to lead like a man, or some style that's not natural to her. But you're saying to be authentic. That seems to that's interesting, right? How does that work with leadership?
Well, so in my experience, both personally and working with leaders over the years, and I've worked with probably several thousand in my career between working with teams and individuals. My experience, authenticity is really what separates great leaders from maybe average or not so good leaders. Because when you know who you are and you have self-insight and self-awareness, then you're not projecting a lot of stuff onto people that maybe not be so healthy. And you're able to lead from a place that is natural and from a place of strength, as opposed to trying to put on airs and be somebody you're not. That's where I think we get into a lot of trouble. So, and as I tell people all the time, so I work with most recently, I work with a lot of physicians. I work with a lot of researchers. I work with folks who tend to be more introverted, and they have this vision of leadership, and they think, well, if I'm just charismatic and I'm big and boisterous and I get out there and I can really lead the crowds, that's what matters. Not so much. It's really about how do you tune into people? How do you have the kind of presence that attracts people to want to follow you, to want to listen to what you have to say? Especially if you're in a position where you don't have positional authority, but you need to be able to influence. People that are real and that are vulnerable, and I mean vulnerable in a positive way, like willing to say, you know what, I don't know that, but let's find out. Or, I did that and I made a mistake doing it, and boy, did I learn a lot. It creates kind of a sense of humanness that enables people to take risks, to be able to be more willing to make a mistake, to learn, to grow, that you don't get when you're coming at it from a different place. So, I think what happens, for a lot of people, I call it, we lose parts of ourselves as we climb up the corporate ladder. Little pieces of ourselves that are important to us kind of fall off. And then you get to a certain place on the ladder and you go, I don't feel like me anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
How does one person, perhaps this is a deep question that's beyond the that we could talk for days about, but if people have climbed up that corporate ladder and they have compromised themselves or their personality or something like that in order to blend in or even stand out, and now they're searching for something deeper or more meaningful. Maybe they're even trying to be a more powerful leader, and they hear this podcast and they hear authenticity. And you mentioned self-awareness and self-insight. One thing that came to mind right away was like the difference between those two, but also that path, like walking that path, right? Seems like we need these two things, self-awareness and self-insight. And then they somehow go hand in hand. Let's explore that. And then when we have them, somehow we become authentic, and some qualities of being authentic are being able to be vulnerable in a good way, human, admitting mistakes, that type of thing. So what's the difference between self-awareness and self-insight? I'm coming at it from like the standard emotional intelligence quadrant by Daniel Goleman, and I'm thinking, oh, self-awareness, like that, yeah, of course. And then self-insight, I haven't heard of that one. Or it seems like a synonym for self-awareness.
Yeah, I think it's more of a synonym.
Okay.
But I think of it, so, about, it's been 14 years ago or so, a friend and colleague and I developed some IP that we use in our work with leaders and with leadership teams called integral intelligence. And what we did was we came up with a model that I think we often think of, we think of intelligence as being cognitive,
mm-hmm.
and now emotional with Goleman's work. He's brought a lot of that around, which is really important. And as you are aware, I'm sure that they've determined through studies that emotional intelligence is every bit, if not more important than cognitive intelligence, right? Totally. So, I mean, it's not like you can be dumb as a post and a nice guy and get by, but it's, you have to have both. It's important, in equal measure. And so what we did was we said, well, that's still not enough. So there's three other domains of intelligence as we see them. One is spiritual. So spiritual, and I'll say a little bit more about each of these. The second one is somatic. And the third is relational. Okay. So it's almost like when you're able to bring all five of these aspects of intelligence to bear and to integrate them in a healthy way, then you can be a powerhouse as a leader. Cognitive, emotional, relational, spiritual, and somatic.
Somatic
is wisdom of the body.
Yeah.
So it's understanding, that there's a lot of things involved in that, but part of it is self-care, making sure that you're getting enough rest, looking at how you carry yourself physically. Are you an imposing figure? Are you an inviting figure in terms of how you show up in your physicality, right?
Yeah.
And then, the somatic piece is also, again, around self-care. Do you get good food, you get enough exercise, you get enough rest, so that you can build the resilience that you need to be successful, especially in today's world.
It seems like so much of what you're talking about right now is starts with seeing leadership or seeing how to influence people. It seems like it's widening people's perceptions.
Yes.
Instead of just being a power player or whatever. It's yeah.
And I use the analogy. I think that we often look through life through a lens like a soda straw. We see what we see, and it's learning
so tiny.
Yeah, and it's learning that there's a big wide world out there. So that's one of the keys to thriving in my book is expansiveness. So how do you begin to open the lens and see things more broadly? And I think when you talk about self-insight and self-awareness, it's very much about how do you tune into what you need to be doing from a somatic standpoint, from a spiritual standpoint. And in our work, spiritual is a much broader connotation. It's more about what's the contribution you want to make to the world, and are you living your values and your purpose in your life? And are you helping other people figure out what theirs is and getting them aligned? Because that's where you get passion and engagement, in work and life. And what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? Who do you want to be known for at the end of the day? And then the relational piece is really how do you operationalize emotional intelligence and how you work and interact with others? So that you're
interesting.
How you execute your emotional intelligence with other people.
Yeah. And would you say like someone first needs to have their perception widened or like be open to this model? And how in your work, I know you talk about in the books, if you like, let's say someone is kind of stuck in a closed-minded perception of leadership. How do they open their eyes? I mean, it seems like if you got the tunnel vision on, if you got that little straw,
Yeah. Yeah.
it seems like there's got to be, something within them that allows themselves to open. Um, but I don't know. Is there any? What do you think about how to get people to? Is it right to say get people to open? Can you present them with an opportunity to open? How do you help someone see a bigger picture?
So I think it's pretty simple. I think people are either motivated to change
Hmm.
out of inspiration or desperation. Okay.
Yeah.
So either someone reads something or talks to somebody or hears something. I just got off a call, started at 7 this morning, with a group of women around the world that I engage with on a monthly basis. And I love those calls, even though I have to get up at 5 o'clock to be able to do them. I love them. They happen once a month. I have 2 different groups that I'm part of. And because I feel so inspired after those conversations. And it's like, garbage in, garbage out. So what are you going to bring in? What are you going to? So we have to be responsible and make the choices we want to make. So, for instance, if I get too locked in on social media, I can often feel discouraged. I see what everything's going on in the world, right? Or I can make a different choice and I read something that is uplifting and inspiring, right?
Yeah.
So I'm self-correcting, right? And I'm deciding to go, I'm going to go towards what inspires me versus ignoring it, feeling less empowered, feeling more despair. And then there comes a certain point in time, I feel desperate and I'm like, oh my God, I have to make a change. This is awful, right?
Yeah.
And I think the universe has a way of some of us are more stubborn than others. I've certainly had my desperation experiences in my lifetime. I spent almost 3 years in bed with a very severe illness because I didn't take care of myself. And that was a desperation experience that led to a big change in my life. So I think it's one of those two things, really, when you boil it down, and we get to choose every day.
Yeah.
Whether we're going to follow the path of inspiration or wait until the universe kicks us around the block and we're in a place of desperation to make.
Yeah. Totally. So how did you, I know you earlier mentioned getting fired too, and that's a story in your book where you were doing well and you got fired and it was like, what the hell? And then you also, it seems like part of an integral part of your story is resilience. And being bedridden for 3 years, I read about that. You were working insane. You were finishing up your PhD or something around there. And
I had to actually stop my study during the time that I was so ill. But,
yeah.
I went back and finished.
How the hell do you pick yourself up after that? That's incredible.
Well, I mean, I feel really grateful. It was like a new lease on life. I feel sometimes like a cat with 9 lives, which that was one of them. But part of it, is also we're on this developmental continuum as human beings. And at different points in our lives, certain things have higher priority. And, when I think about when I was in my 20s and my 30s and the kind of energy I had to, carpe diem, go and seize the day, no matter what. I mean, at that point in my life, I treated myself like a Mack truck. I just drove and drove and drove and drove and drove. I ended up paying for it, right? Because I got so sick. But that experience, as hard as it was at the time, was incredibly liberatory. because I was forced to sit with myself
Mm.
and decide, is this who you want to be? And is this what you want to do? And is this what you want to be contributing to the world?
Yeah.
And it was a sea change for me.
Yeah.
So I think we go through hard experiences. We lose people we love. We get divorced. We get, things happen. We lose homes. Things happen we don't anticipate. And so much of it really is true. I think Viktor Frankl said it better than anyone in Man's Search for Meaning. It's like the only thing we really have, we can really be in charge of at the end of the day is our attitude.
Yeah.
You can be in the most desperate conditions as he was in a concentration camp, right? And he said, I'm going to do something with this. I'm gonna make something of this experience. And we all have that choice every day. Whatever the experience is, what are we going to do with it? How much energy are we going to give it?
Yeah.
For good or for evil, or for positive or for positively or negatively.
Huh. And is this like when you help the executive coaches, I'm thinking back to the audience, and a lot of them are managers, people who manage teams.
Yeah.
How does this kind of wisdom, the wisdom of seeking stuff that inspires you, the wisdom of self-awareness and kind of being able to take care of yourself and feeling your body, are these the issues, or and then also too the question, asking yourself, what do I want to give? How do I want to show up? How do I want to contribute? Is that when you work with executives? I'm curious to like kind of get behind the scenes. Is that what you're talking about, or is it more like business plans and the other stuff?
So, a couple of things I would say about that. The way that I see leadership is through two lenses. One is what we call way of doing. So that's all the functional skills of leadership. So that is, learning how to do a spreadsheet, learning how to build a strategy, learning how to, if you're an accountant, everything you need to know about numbers, right? And how to work the tax system, et cetera. Bad subject today, but that's that's what we call way of doing. And then the other piece is way of being. And that's the how you show up. How do you show up every day as a leader and a human being? The work that I do in the world is very much in the way of being space, right? More than it is the way of doing. There are lots of coaches out there who help you build strategy, learn how to do all that. Now I can help people with those things, but my real focus, because most of the time I work with people at a director or a senior director or a VP or an SVP level, sometimes a CEO in an organization. So they've been able to master the way of doing space pretty well to have been able to climb and get where they are. But what a lot of people are missing still is the way of being. It's how do you really, when you now have, leadership authority over a group of 500 or a group of even 50 or a group of 5,000, how do you show up in a way that really is compelling and inspiring and makes people want to follow you?
Yeah.
Gets people bought in. So that's the space where I work in, and that's my niche, right? And other people call themselves, I'm a strategic coach, or, whatever, I'm a marketing coach, or that's not really my space. My space is more in the human interaction dimension. And I work with really smart people, off the charts, brilliant, smart people who may need to work with the soft skills piece, right?
I hear you. I hear you. I'm having a hard time kind of imagining, when I think of managers, oftentimes they are the smarter people, not just cognitively, but, they got to be managers at a, Google or something like that, because they could manage people and managing not by the whip, but
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
getting people to show up at work and do their best. And I know directors and so forth, they do seek ways of being. I almost see the directors as already like exemplifying ways of being. Well, I guess like when they reach out to you or like what are their struggles, and then do they say, hey, I'm looking for like a way of being coach, or how does that first initial connection happen where you're actually they understand that you can help them?
So usually there's a presenting issue, right?
Hmm.
So the presenting issue may be I'm entering into this new role, and I have a lot more people now I'm in charge of. I'm not quite sure how to do it. I'm afraid I need some help, or so that's a transition conversation.
Yeah.
Right? Because
Yeah,
there's always an entry point, right? Or a person's manager might say, this person, technically speaking, is like fabulous, but they have an edge when it comes to working with people. Can you help them?
Got it.
I mean, it's as different as people are, the reason why, or very often it's this person is really competent, but they never speak up. And they're losing their opportunity to be a more powerful leader because they're kind of in their shell and they're really quiet and they don't contribute that much, but I know it's there.
So that's like our stereotypical audience member, not stereotypical, but it's in Silicon Valley. A lot of people are nerds, and I say nerds in a good way. I'm a nerd too. Yeah. But some people are shy, and it's fine to be introverted. It's fine to be quiet, but some people are overly quiet, overly shy. They don't talk enough. Maybe we could switch focus a little bit to your book and talk about those the acronym of Thriver and how someone could go through some of these different go through the model of thriving to open up, to get more respect. I know. Yeah. Maybe let's go through the model of the book from the perspective of a corporate employee, so to speak.
Yeah, let me find the model in here.
Cool.
I should know what page it's on.
Let's see. The trust, humility, resilience,
so there's
direction. Yeah.
Here it is. Yeah. So this is it's a 7 keys to becoming a thriver.
Yeah.
And the acronym I came up with was that I really think there's 7. So let me back up a minute and say the reason I wrote the book, which I think is important, is I was really astounded at the Gallup statistics of how few people really felt like they were thriving in the world, particularly in this country.
Can I interject real quick? I thought I have much more abysmal perspectives than you. When I heard that only 20% were thriving or something like that, I was like, wow, that's 6 times higher than I thought.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyways, sorry. Yeah, it's pretty low. People that are thriving, 1 out of 5.
Low. And then the engagement statistics were incredibly low, and were actually engaged in their work.
Doesn't America lose like 300 billion a year
more than that.
from disengagement? Just disengagement.
Yeah, disengagement, right?
It's crazy.
And a lot of that's because people aren't doing what they really feel like they're called to do, right? They haven't figured out what their purpose is, and they're not really living into that. A lot of it has to do with they have crummy managers who don't draw it out. A lot of it has to do, I think, quite frankly, with just settling. And we very unconsciously settle for surviving when we could be thriving. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So I decided to write the book because I was so alarmed by that. And I saw it. I mean, I would be working with people who were, pulling in $300,000-$400,000 a year, should be by all accounts happy. They had kids, they had families, they were living in the Bay Area, which is not easy to do. And they were not thriving. They were unhappy. They were just living literally, not just paycheck to paycheck. I mean, they had foundations and homes and all that kind of stuff. But it was like, what's wrong with this picture? This really makes me sad, So what can I do to help here?
Mm.
So what I did was I took a year of my own life that I dedicated to learning what it meant to be a thriver.
Wow.
And I focused all my energies and my practice and everything for a year on what was it really. And then I looked back over the year and I said, what are the things that I think really were important? And that's when I came up with the model, which is trust, humility, resilience, inner direction, vision, expansiveness, and responsibility. So those were the kind of the 7 keys that I learned in my own journey. And then as I started looking at all the clients I had worked with, they seemed to really fit. And they just happen to make a pretty nice acronym as well.
Right.
Yeah. So that I, more than anything, so I could remember it when I was talking about it.
Yeah. That's a key part of.
Yeah. Then I went in each chapter and I dug in to what each one of those meant and some stories about them, and then a practice and some reflection questions so that it kind of becomes a coach in a book that you can use yourself.
Yeah. And I loved your stories in the book too. Like, I guess you exemplify the authentic, vulnerable leadership, because I remember those stories. Some of those stories stand out to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and the analogy of the whale, that was very unique too.
Yeah.
What was that analogy? I'm blanking.
So it's how I got to that story was Abraham Maslow, who was one of the forefathers of psychology in the United States, a thought leader. He's the one who came up with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and what we need as humans. And he came up also with this notion of what he called the Jonah complex. And so I took the story of the Jonah in the Bible, right? Who is asked to do this great work in the world by God, like the big kahuna, right? And he doesn't think he can do it. He's like, whoa, that's like, I can't do that. That's way beyond my pay grade. So this guy's like,
is that the Jonah complex, like insecurities or something like that?
So what Maslow did was he took the Jonah, he talks about the reasons why we're actually as afraid to succeed as we are to fail.
There were 5, right? They were like, it's going to be too much. I won't be able to handle it. People won't like me.
Yeah, all of those. Yeah. So fear and narcissism. And so I used the Jonah story to sort of set the landscape for how these things show up. And then the book and the keys are really the anecdote to that. So given that that's true, let's figure out where I get tripped up, which one of these things trips me up, and then how do I move through these 7 steps in a way that will help liberate me from that limitation.
Well, let's go through one of them with me, and let's do it live.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
So pick one.
Yeah, I'll say won't be able to handle it, or that it won't matter. Probably that it won't matter. That it won't actually be a benefit. Is that one? That it won't
be. So what you do might not be a benefit.
Yeah, like people won't like it. Probably people won't. People.
Is it fear of rejection?
Probably fear of rejection. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Fear of rejection. Yeah.
So what I would say if I were coaching you is if it's fear of rejection and you look at the 7 keys, my guess is there's probably something around trust for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So if I were working with you, I would say I would dig into that one. So, and when we look at trust, I look at it kind of from 3 perspectives. Do you trust yourself? Number one. Number two, do you trust others? Right?
Yeah.
And number three, do you trust that you're being held by something greater? You know, that you don't have to, that you don't have to make everything happen in your life that happens in your life. That
So
there are other forces at work, right?
I'd say I'm probably like 100% on trusting myself. I'm probably, for the most part, trusting others, but I do feel like the job that needs to get, the job needs to get done, I got to do it. And then the higher power, like, yeah, I feel it kind of quasi, like it's there, but I don't know if it's supporting that.
Yeah.
Something like that, kind of like the law of gravity. Like, yeah, the law of gravity exists, but I don't know if it's exactly working for me. It's there.
Yeah. So what I think is interesting from what you just said was you trust yourself 100%, but you don't trust you're not going to be rejected.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Is that true?
Is that a discrepancy? That might be.
So what I would say if I were coaching you is, and I would work with you around, is how to make sure you build enough trust in yourself that even if you are rejected, it won't matter that much.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. So that because what I hear as you're talking is you're still allowing the voices around you to dictate whether what you're trying to do here is of value or not.
So how do we, and myself included, thank you, by the way, too. This is all pretty spontaneous. I wasn't planning on it. I'm just trying to find ways to deliver value to an audience and I said, hey, let's do it. But okay, so I feel this. Yeah. So how do people, myself included, how do I tune, what's the question? How do I how do I find my own voice that I can listen to 51% and then the other voices are 49%?
So there's a couple of things, and I talk about this in the book. And I use this model just because I think it's easy. And that is that we all have an inner critic, right? Someone who, that voice that lives inside of us who says, oh, you'll never make this work. You'll never be good enough. You know, mine is the not good enough voice, right? That's the one I have to struggle with a lot. It's like, no matter what you do, you write a book, you get a PhD, you work with all these people, you have a nice home, you're still not enough. You're still not enough. You're still not enough. So it's like, that's the voice that I have to struggle with. Right. I have to, and I don't want to struggle with, I have to learn to manage.
Yeah. Right? That's your voice. Yeah.
On the flip side of that, I believe we all have inside us that voice that wants us to come here and fulfill our mission, because the world needs us, especially right now. It needs our gifts. However it is we deliver those for whatever it is we're here to do, right? And everybody's different. So we have to choose, what are we listening to?
Yeah.
And we're actually hardwired. There's been brain research that's done on this. We're hardwired 6-to-1 for negativity versus positivity. Okay? So the inner critic gets 6 times more airplay. Unless, again, we have self-insight and self-awareness and we go, I see what's happening. I'm not going to go there. I'm going to turn this one up and this one down.
Interesting. I hear it. It's almost like it's not that you're tuning out or that the critic is ever gone. I really liked your reframe of managing it, where you say, hey, this is 6 times heavier. This negative critic is 6 times heavier. I've been programmed this way through biological evolution. It ain't changing, whatever, childhood, society, whatever. It ain't changing. But, keyword but, there is a different part that I can tune and place more emphasis on.
Yes.
Yeah.
And learning how to really develop that, work with that, live with that. And that's where self-compassion comes in.
Mm. Mm.
So we have to be compassionate with ourselves. Now we're on this learning journey. That's what life is. You know, we're learning about ourselves, about each other. We're learning every day. So how do we then step into developing a different relationship with that voice? And you're not going to fall down. You know, it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. That's just life.
Yeah.
And there's no nirvana. And there's, I call it, as I always tell people, there is no island. We keep swimming for this place. If we just get there, we're going to be happy. If we just get there. And then we swim and we're so tired when we get there, we don't even recognize we've made it.
Yeah.
Right. And then we don't like it anymore because it's not what we thought it was. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's really about how do you enjoy the journey every day in a way that is helpful and
Yeah. What'd you get your PhD in?
I got my PhD and the concentration was learning and change in human systems.
Interesting.
So it's kind of a hybrid of organization development, adult learning, transformational learning.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
what's your personality type? I mean, what do you think about personality scores and all that other stuff? Are they? So
I think any of that stuff can be really helpful and instructive as long as you don't box yourself in with it.
So it can be used for a self-awareness, self-insight, but if you identify and rigidly
that becomes your sole focus. So I'm, in terms of the things I know about myself, I am an ENFP on the Myers-Briggs. That's used a lot. So I'm always about how I use that for myself is I'm a big ideator, right? I think ideas a lot for me. I'm also ideation's like really high on my strength finder in the Gallup strength finder. And I'm a big P on the Enneagram. I mean, on the Myers-Briggs. So I have to rein myself in sometimes, or I don't manifest things. I have great ideas, but actually bringing them to earth and manifesting them is more challenging for me. That's not. So I'm an ideate, right? So it's learning what to do with it and how to work with it. I call myself a 3 in rehab on the Enneagram. I use the Enneagram a lot in my work because it's really a powerful tool. So those are a couple of things that I know. So I take what I know about myself from those tools and say, how does it support me and how does it limit me?
Yeah. And these tools, so for finding purpose and stuff, I can see how the self-awareness comes out of, a variety of sources, the personality test, maybe talking with friends, maybe just journaling or what. And then developing a purpose, that seems to be the question in this day and age is, especially with these 300 plus $billion a year in disengagement and crummy, part of it's crummy managers, but another part is people just settling or not. I guess this is the inner direction part in your book. Is it asking questions, like, what do I like to do? Is asking yourself questions, how could I imagine myself having fun and serving? Is that kind of the way you'd recommend people begin to discover their purpose, is through questions, or are there other things that you'd recommend?
So I think that's really important. And I think one of the things that I think has kind of gone by the wayside a lot in corporate America, which is really a shame, and I think it's been really detrimental, is we don't give ourselves time for reflection. And I always suggest and recommend to my coaching clients that you carve out some time every day, every week, every month to really be still, be quiet, get rid of the clutter in your mind. So I strongly recommend some kind of a meditation practice for people, whatever that works for them, and or martial arts practice, but whatever it is that enables you to center and to actually focus on your breath and to bring yourself back where you want to be.
Yeah.
I think questions are great. I think finding a mentor, even if it's an informal mentor, someone that you admire and respect, who's willing to spend some time with you to help you ask the big questions, is really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think making sure that you're aligned, whatever you're doing is aligned with your values, and being clear what your values are is important. And being aligned and doing what your interests are is very important. Because I don't really believe at the end of the day that any of us is given a purpose that we can fulfill.
Oh, that is kind of something that's, I heard somewhere that a purpose is like something you have to repeat, like brushing your teeth or something like that. Like if your purpose is being honest in relationships, then you have to be honest day by day. It wasn't something I checked that off the.
So I also think it's important not to get too granular with what your purpose is. So, like you could say, my purpose is making widgets. That's very granular.
Yeah.
Or you could say, my purpose is creating, new technology that really helps people connect in a powerful way with each other in the world.
That sounds so much cooler than.
Okay, so how do you live into it? So when I was so sick and out of commission, I got very clear, lying in bed day after day after day, that my purpose, my primary purpose in this lifetime, was to be a bridge to heal the wounds that separate.
Wow.
Okay? So then from there on, anything I did had to fit with that purpose. And every day in the coaching work I do is all about that. People have wounds and they have had trauma and they have things that have kept them from being able to be all they're meant to be and make the kind of impact they want to make in the world. And my job is to help them see that and heal from that and move into a bigger way of seeing themselves, a more expansive way of being in the world that's more powerful.
Wow.
And more helpful, right?
Yeah. I mean, I can tell, like, just speaking with you, that this is something you've lived and you've set thousands of people with. Man, like, that's incredible. Human potential.
But each person has that.
Yeah.
We just have to find out what it is and not limit ourselves too much by, defining our purpose too narrowly. Like, think about what it is in terms of what your contribution at the end of the day is really going to be.
Something, that the audience might find useful too is I've been redefining my purpose. I'll create a sentence, it'll stay for like a month or something like that. I think now I'm at like living a high EQ life, and maybe in a month or two that'll switch. I tend to just, I'm reading books and something will stick, a conversation, and I'll be like, oh, that's my purpose. And because I can kind of feel it in my heart, that'll just change the sentence. But yeah, I found it. I think the more I write out my purpose and try to define it, the more clarity I get month by month, year by year on what actually resonates with me.
So one of the things I would suggest if I were coaching you, in terms of working with purpose, is you're naming what you think it is. I think the way to help you really get to what it is to ask yourself why. So if your purpose is, I'm living a high EQ life every day, I would say dig a little deeper and ask yourself, why is that so important to you?
Yeah.
What would it enable you to do if you did that?
I think what I really would, and this, I did write this stuff down too, but it would, be a complete self-identity. I think like that's feeling like whole, feeling, complete, not lacking anything. And then I think developing an audience and being able to, impact people and be seen and respected, and live, uh, to be seen as a power figure or have some respect in the community. I think that's really important to me as well. But yeah, definitely the something about identity, having a whole identity, having, yeah, yeah.
And then I would say, as a coach, why is that important to you?
Oh my gosh.
So you're going to keep, here's the thing about self-insight is you have to keep, it's almost like an onion, and you have to keep peeling back the layers, right?
Jeez.
So that's how you really develop what you're
Well, shit, I'm not there yet.
so keep doing it. That's what's fun about,
That's
right?
good though. That's good. I'm gonna ponder that like the rest of today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh. Yeah. Wow. Why? Yeah. Wow.
So peel the layers back.
Peel the layers
The
back.
other thing I would say in looking at purpose, which I think is important.
Not sure off the top of my head. Yeah.
There's a developmental process people go through. And I've seen this happen at people at different periods of their life. And it generally happens sometimes between like 30 and 50. That's been my experience. And the shift that starts to happen is we start asking a different set of questions. The first set of questions is more, what's in it for me and what do I want? What starts to shift is the questions then become, what am I here to contribute? What is the world asking of me? So there's more of a focus initially on what you want to get in the world, and it's appropriate, it's age appropriate. And then as you mature, it shifts and it becomes, what am I here to give, not what am I here to get? Right?
Yeah.
That can happen really along that continuum, and it doesn't happen for everybody.
Sure.
I suspect there's some politicians in Washington right now that's never happened before. But, it can also happen when you're younger.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been I feel like I got to go contemplate all this stuff. Thank you. Thank you for
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Self-insight.
And thank you for having me. And this is the book. If anybody's interested, it's called The Thriver's Edge. 7 Keys to Transform the Way You Live, Love, and Lead. Yeah. And it's on Amazon, Thriver's Edge. Your website, PositiveImpactLLC.com. PositiveImpactLLC.com is my corporate website, and DonnaStoneham.com is the book website. So, and then our model is on IntegralIQ.com, the model that we talked about today. IntegralIQ.com. Well, mind blown right now. Mind blown. I love it. I love it. I absolutely love it. Thank you so much for the space and time to have the conversation. I really enjoyed it. And keep me posted on your purpose. Yeah, and I forgot to our last question. Our website is HackEQ. So we always finish up with what's your number one life hack? What's your number one way to hack emotional intelligence and boost it to enhance your day, enhance your life? What's your number one hack? You're asking me the question? Yep. Yeah. My number one hack is to make sure that I start my day in meditation. That's actually me too, by the way. Yep. Totally sets the tone for everything. And when I don't do it, I'm not as nice a person as I'd like to be. So. I love it. Thank you. Thank you. It's been great. Okay. Take care. Bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.